In 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Hi, Diana Pires. Welcome back to the VIP Collective.
Thank you for having me. I'm so happy to be here with you.
So, well, it's really funny because it was March 16th, the day that we will always remember. And you were actually the last person in studio to sit at the gold mics with me and discuss the takedown of Corona and what was happening.
That's a heartbreaker considering I was the last, but
you were the last. Like that was 6 or 7 months ago. So it's really hard to believe. I think when that happened back then, we didn't actually assume we'd still be having virtual chats into middle of October.
Not at all. We essentially, when we were sitting down, we're like, oh yeah, it's going to be a month, 6 weeks, maybe 2 months. No one ever thought that we'd be here this long. I mean, obviously, as the months went on, we saw that there could be, something else dragging on, and we would be in a situation like this where we're going into phase 2. So definitely didn't expect it, but definitely prepared now that it's here, right? What are we going to do?
I know. Now I feel like we've all kind of gotten used to it, unfortunately, but yeah, here we are. So we're chatting again, and I just want to mention you have a very beautiful wall in the background.
Thank you.
This is your office?
This is my office, yes. It's the back part of my office where I hang out
with
my floral mural.
I like it.
I
like it a lot. Okay, so this podcast is really an update. So we are sitting just post Thanksgiving. Mm-hmm. So we heard news last week from Doug Ford. Thought it would be a good time to just talk about what the new regulations are. I'm sure a lot of people have heard at this point, but just even going over what that looks like now and even into the next few months.
Absolutely. So I thought Friday was very interesting because they came out and told us on Friday just before the long weekend. Mm-hmm. And essentially originally there was 2 different conversations that they had on Friday in regards to our event industry and social gatherings. So at first around like 12:30, 1 o'clock, they're like, we're banning events effective Tuesday, October 13th, but then they retracted that later on in the day. And I think they kind of understood that that's not physically possible to ban all these events right at this moment. So essentially what they did is they reduced the numbers in a facility to 10 people and then 25 people outdoors. And this is Toronto, Peel, and Ottawa. So these are the new regulations, and this is updated effective of October 13th. So 10 people allowed inside and 25 people allowed outdoor for a social gathering.
And that's at an actual banquet facility or?
Correct.
And
Correct.
so
and even private facilities, they want you to keep it very minimal at your homes. Again, the same numbers. And also one thing to keep in mind now as well is if you're doing your social gatherings in a venue or outdoor, they only want 6 people at a table. So that is something else that has been updated since, because before we were allowed 10 people at a table, and now they only want 6 people at a table.
Wow.
So something to consider as well.
Yeah, no doubt. So the other thing, so there's 10 people indoors, 25 outdoors. Now let's talk about staffing, because obviously it takes an army to staff a wedding when you have photo, video, you have planners, catering. So that does not include staffing. Correct. Or does it?
It does not include the staffing.
That's good, or else it would just be the couple and a lot of vendors.
That's it.
What a dream day.
We laugh about this, but it's been a serious question.
No, I know it's a serious question, but if you have to think that it was just the vendors and the couple.
It'd be horrible. I mean, what are you going to do? I mean, you have to pick and choose. And then we also have to think about how much money people have invested to be, for this to happen last minute, to be thrown this curveball yet again, and deal with these numbers. And then you have to cut your guest list once again. It's a little bit crazy, and it's extremely overwhelming. So the good news is that within the facility, we're okay to have those vendors, but everybody, of course, has to be following all the proper protocol. You also want to limit the number of staff that you have. So you're not going to need double the staff for these types of events. You now minimize those numbers. So if there's a planner, you only need one because it's 10 people indoors. If it's a photographer, I would recommend just the one, and vice versa. Like, keep everything down to a minimum, just so we're preventing the spread, we're keeping the precautions, and then those guests around you can feel comfortable as well.
For sure.
Based on the number of 10.
Yeah.
Above that.
So like sticking on the awkward topic of uninviting guests, what was your experience this summer? Like, what did a lot of your couples, what did they do? Did they send out invites? Did they offer live streams? Like, what kind of,
it's the hardest, honestly, reducing your guest count is one of the hardest things to do, especially when it's done in such a short period of time. So I know for a fact, I can speak from many clients that we worked with, it was a very challenging and very difficult thing to do, especially when you have already pre-sent out the invites and now you have to cut things down. However, there is a reality that this is going to happen because of what was going on. So there was prepared. We essentially, you know, when you're having a wedding with your numbers are limitless, the A and B list doesn't generally come into effect. But now you have no choice. You need to have an A, B, and C list. So part of your A list is your immediate family, and then go into B list, you're adding in your friends, and then on top of that to your C list, where you have more guests that are friends and family, but if you're cutting the numbers down, you know where you need to stick to. So we had a lot of those conversations on those lists, what the lists look like, when you start having those conversations, and when to start cutting them down. And a lot of the communication with guests through email, telephone calls, because everything needs to be so quick, you need to be able to contact your guests right away. So phone calls, text messages, emailing, those were the ways that communication was happening over the last couple of months, just to ensure that everybody was getting the information updated right away. Because we had some instances where information was dealt to the night before, things needed to change. So there's no way that you can email, or send out a letter. You need to call people or text them and let them know that there's been a change and this is what's happened. And people have reverted to do online streaming, but we've had some couples that decided to just have an intimate setting without the streaming, and then they would do something later on. Because things were changed so quickly in such a short period of time, you literally have to react to what you're doing at that present moment. But they had the option, if they wanted to do it, to have the online streaming available to guests. And then we would send out that information. But for many of our guests, we stuck to as much as we can do in that short time frame to flip things around and make it happen with who they had.
Yeah, some of our couples as well, we've done a handful of weddings into the fall, and they decided live stream could be an option, but they decided to have it filmed, and then they weren't going to show the film to their family. So they said they were just going to opt for that because there is an added cost with
exactly.
When you're hiring.
And it is, and think about it, like you're already, stuck with these numbers, these final details. You have to reduce guests. You're still paying pretty much the same thing because you're left to the day before. So it becomes very difficult when you have to add on more expenses. So anything that we could do to help where we're reducing these costs is the first thing that we thought about, because we feel it's unfair to the couple, and it's great to put out this virtual world and be able to showcase their event, but if it's not affordable at that time, it's something that they shouldn't be doing, because they have to bring in those people to do the live feed and all of that. But it's completely understandable. If you have the option, we do it ahead of time. But if it's something last minute that happens where they opted not to have it in the first place, there's no point of offering it if it's like getting cut down to numbers the day before or a couple of days prior.
Yeah, definitely, because there is definitely an expense to it, just because of the logistics that goes into it.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So let's talk about numbers again. So we've got 10 indoors, we've got 25 outdoors. What happens? A lot of venues now, some venues, I shouldn't say a lot, but some venues in the city or outside the city have tents available outside of their venue, and they're able to host people in the tents. So what are the protocols when it comes to having the tent in a banquet property with the sliding walls? Like what are the regulations from that?
Well, because they're so specific right now, before you were able to host 50 people in a venue in different event spaces. So if you had 2 rooms, you can host 50 people in 2 different rooms. Now they're only allowing you to host it in a single facility, which means it doesn't matter how many square footage you have. you can only host one event, and the numbers have been reduced to 10. So you can't have multiple events on the property. So I can only imagine over, you know, people who do have multiple facilities, like with the news that broke out last week that you can only cut down to 50 in a single facility, what that did for many people who were hosting multiple events in a single facility. That was challenging on its own, and I'm sure there was a lot of heartbreak over what was going on. So venues, what they're doing now, they're taking very proper precautions to ensure they're not hosting more than one event in the facility because they can't, and to ensure that they're following all the proper protocols. And I know for a fact that there's only a few that are offering the options of the outdoor, because we're worried that something might happen in the next week where the numbers are going to get reduced again, or they're going to ban it. So we're taking proper precautions and really watching out every single day to ensure that we see if things need to adjust. They're not offering the options to people. So if you're someone who is planning an event in a very short period of time, I would reconsider doing that, unless it's something that's been moved, because we don't know what the next 28 days are going to look like. So if you're thinking you're considering it, wait, because it's better that you hold off. But if you're someone who's already committed, look at the options, talk to your venue to make sure you're the only event that's happening in the venue. So we're not getting close to, and then they're canceling events on you. Because that's something that did happen last week to a lot, not our clients, but I know that it happened where events had to get canceled because they were only allowing one event in the facility at a single time.
Oh, that's tough.
Very tough. So venues have learned from these changes to know that, you know what, let's just host one event and that's it. So if the numbers do get reduced, we can still accommodate an updated number or a different restriction, but we're not going to have to cancel other events that are happening at the facility because who are you going to choose and how do you pick? Right? It's very, very hard. That's and you're breaking tough. Someone's heart. So I'm high, if anybody who's a venue is watching this and knowing these protocols, and especially if you have a big facility, over the next 28 days or the next 2 months, try not to offer too many room availabilities or try to double book your event spaces, because we're in a space right now where we're only allowing a facility for one single event. So they have to be very mindful about that.
And I guess we should state, because this new regulation is for 28 days moving forward.
Correct. So until November 7th. So we don't know what the update's going to look like following this time, if the numbers, if we can host more guests or if they're going to reduce it. It all depends on what's coming in stats and what that looks like. So we'll have to wait another 28 days.
Do you feel like you've just been on your toes since March? Yes. It's like pivot. I'm picturing like the Michael Jackson, the moonwalking.
Oh, it's like literally my phone's right here. Then I'm like, hold on a second, get the other phone. And then be like, wait 1 second. It's so much back and forth.
Yeah.
And it's, for us, one thing that I figured out is that we can manage it. If just throw it at us, it's coming, we're going to figure it out. At the end of the day, there's always a solution. We can always make things happen. We can't panic, and we have to figure out the best way to do it. But when you're someone who hasn't planned events and you're a couple and you're dodging all these things, it's a lot, and it's a lot of it has been new to us in the last 6 months, but I feel like we've become pros in the last, 3-4 months on how to kind of flip all these things around, especially with all the events that we've been doing in the last couple of months. So I can definitely say it has its challenges, but you have to be prepared for everything, and you need to know what's happening. Mm-hmm. What you can do, what you can't do, and making sure that there's a lot of flexibility, like there's flexibility with the venue, there's flexibility with vendors, and flexibility with your guest count, and making sure you're prepared to pivot when things do happen. Because before we used to say, oh, that's never going to happen. Yeah. And now it's like, well, we know it might happen, so let's make sure we're prepared and have that A, B, and C plan in place if things do happen. Mm-hmm. So we did an event a couple of weeks ago where we were planning to do it outdoors because we were allowed at the time to host up to 100 on private property. Yeah. And we had everything lined up, tent lined up, you name it, we had it all. And then we we got told that we had to reduce the numbers to 25 because the numbers went on a private party to 25, but at a venue facility, you were still allowed up to the 100 guest count outdoors on that facility. And we had to find a venue that was able to do that. And then we got retracted again with the numbers being reduced. So it's like, how do you pivot? How do you change? How do you adjust? And it's all done in like a week and a half to 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Transitioning things really fast. So it's just being prepared and having all plans in place to make sure that you can make it happen, and know what you're working with. You know, make sure before you're making any adjustments, know what you're working with. And this is a very valuable time to have a planner on your side who can help you and deal with those logistical details, because it's a lot to handle in a very short period of time.
Yeah, we even had a couple just before that regulation went from 100 to 25, and she was planning a tent in her grandfather's backyard. And, you know, they had, I think, maybe 75 people they were going to account for. And then within a week, she had to find a venue and make sure that she could go there. And it was,
and then you got to tell all your guests, you got to communicate with all of your vendors. You've got to change your full floor plan layout. Things have to adjust. There's a lot to do, right? So it is very challenging, but it's possible. We were able to do it. Especially, you know, in the last couple of weeks with all the changes, and last month we've adapted. So we were okay, but it can be very straining. And you have to be available. You have to make yourself available and make sure that you're there to help the clients, and we make it work. That's what we can do.
So into November, December, January, like this may very well be one of the last COVID podcasts for a little bit, because I think now the wedding season is now winding down. Most people utilize the summer weather, having the opportunity to be outside. So as we get into winter and weddings are now forced indoors and the numbers are smaller, I don't know necessarily that couples are choosing that option. So do you have anything moving forward into the fall, winter?
We do. We have small events, like very small, like 10, 15, 25 people. So
weddings or other,
like intimate social gatherings, like private little parties. We have that coming up. All of our weddings that were larger, we moved. There, you know, as in all honesty, once we saw the direction of everything that was going, especially what was it, July, June, I spoke to a lot of my clients and I'm like, if you want to create the wedding you want to do, let's move it to next year, especially with the way that you've invested. Where there's clients that came up and were like, you know, we want to have something small and intimate. They're planning it last minute. We've done a lot of those events where they're just like, they just want to get married, and that's completely okay, but they understand you know, what's at stake and how that's going to work if we do need to make adjustments. But anyone, let's say, who still considering having their wedding and hoping for their numbers to go up, I would say really consider next year. You know, move your wedding. And I'm not saying that to break anyone's heart. I'm just saying this is the reality right now. We're at 10 people. If you can go from cutting your 50 guest list to 10 and having your event, you know, do it. That's on you, right? That's your decision. But if you've already invested all of this money into your event, and if you're forced to reduce and not be able to adjust the numbers and pricing and your budget, then you're going to have to move your wedding date. Because it comes down to a loss. Where are you okay to lose? If you know you're going to be spending an additional, like you're no longer spending $225 a person, and you're now spending like $800 a person because the numbers are fluctuating. If you also had to reduce a lot, there's something that you really have to consider. Or if you're someone who's thinking about doing something small, then that's okay. You can do something super uber intimate. But anybody who's had to reduce it is looking after the 7th of November. So these next 28 days are really going to dictate what you can do and cannot do as we approach those dates.
So situationally, if I was to be getting married February 3rd of next year, what do you advise at this point?
I do the 60-day rule. So let's have a conversation in December, the beginning of December, and see where we're at. Now, a lot of venues are either doing the 60-day to 90-day rule. So essentially you check as close as you get, because we have clients and couples that we know that are like, you know what, doesn't matter what, I'm going to get married. Do your wedding. You know what you're doing. It's okay. Start making the adjustments, start reducing your guest count. You still haven't sent out your invites. You're okay. But then there are those that are hoping that they can still keep the same numbers that they have. I can honestly tell you, based on the direction that we're going in, because we haven't seen changes, if there's going to be any changes in the circumstances that we have, we're going to probably see them in mid-January to February, where things are getting better. Because right now, they're going down for the next 28 days. We've reduced it. We can see our industry as a whole has gotten that effect, even in restaurants closing down the indoor dining. So we see that the pivot isn't going positively, so we need to give ourselves that opportunity. So I would say December, start revisiting the February, March, and April weddings, and we can kind of go from there.
Yeah, my theory is that in Canada, it gets cold, so we're all gonna stay in. We're all gonna watch lots of Netflix, and then we're gonna, it's gonna be mid-February, we're gonna open the door and we're just gonna hear the birds, and that's it, back to it.
That's what's going to happen in January for sure. Mid-January. Yeah, I think mid-January we're going to be better. And I think things will look up from then. But right now, because we're in like this wintry, cold season, and there's a combination of the flu and COVID, it's a mismatch. So it's just better to stay cozy home, indoors, and then start thinking about your events in the wintertime. And it's a perfect opportunity to now think about, so next year there's going to be a lot going on because we want to get our events back to normal. So I know everybody's going to be working really hard for that. So there's a few things that we can do going forward to keep our mind off of COVID and focused on planning your wedding beautifully.
So what do you suggest if it's next year? Yes. What do we say is like, okay, well, you've made the decision to move your wedding date. So this is what you should do throughout the winter to ease the stress moving forward, or something like that.
First thing I'm going to mention, if couples have not done this yet, is do a full disconnect. Like disconnect from everything and anyone and just hang out together. So I know a lot of couples that have taken like trips to Algonquin, you can plan like a little skating trip together, do a disconnect. Don't think about your wedding. Don't think about planning. Take a moment for yourselves because this has been very straining, very stressful. So just enjoy each other's company. Once you've gotten that, then start thinking about all the things about yourself. I find that a lot of times when we're planning events, as you get closer to your event day, you're thinking about a lot of personalized details and adding in the last minute things. We'll start thinking about those now. Like for instance, slideshows. When you get closer to your wedding day, you forget, you're like, oh my gosh, I want to add a slideshow. I want to get photos together. Start doing that now. Start putting the album of photos together in a file online. Start creating something special, a memory. Maybe come up with storytelling. Like maybe your video is going to be your experience of what planning looked like to COVID, what's that done for your relationship in a positive way, and then kind of bring that to your event day with all these fun things that you got to experience this year, your journey over the last couple of months going into next year. So that's cool. I think that would be nice. And it really gives you time to really think about all those little things that you didn't necessarily have the opportunity to do before because we're so busy working and stressing out with the last minute planning, where now you have ample time. So put that list together and put that and fuel that into your wedding. I think that will be really nice to do.
Now, I do want to ask and touch back on slideshows. Can we just, what is your time frame that you say? If you're going to put together a slideshow, how long of a slideshow? 3 minutes, 5 minutes, no longer than 10 minutes? Because I mean, if you think about someone's life, they're most likely getting married in their mid-20s into 30s. Are we showing the whole thing? What is a good time frame for a slideshow to keep your guests entertained?
Okay, so it depends on the type of slideshow. There's the slideshow that people have running throughout the whole wedding, in between speeches, during cocktail hour. I would put, as many photos as you can in that, because you don't want to see repetitive photos. So I would say a nice 25 to 50 photos. That's great if you're continuously having it go on. If you're doing it as a presentation, I would say 3 minutes max. 3 to 4 minutes when it comes to photos. It's a long time to have a lot of photos. So 2.5 to 3 minutes is a perfect amount of time. And I personally love photos when you have before they were together. So it's like the baby phase, then you have like the little teen phase, family phase, and then the relationship phase. I think that's important. So as in 3 decades, you know what I mean?
Right,
so
yeah.
3 presentations and have his and hers and then their mid-childhood, because people want to see those photos as well, like especially when they're in the photos. So if you can find some great photos of guests with you or relatives, I think that's something nice to add to personalization. But the baby pictures are a must, like you know, the oohs and the ahs and like how cute they were, or look at that hilarious that haircut was, or whatever it may be. I think it's a sense of bringing back memories, and people look back at it for a moment, like especially if they were a part of that, they can relive that with you. So I think up to 3 minutes is perfect.
Yeah, because I think sometimes, and even because I work in like the video and editing side, but I think sometimes, you know, you have so many photos and sometimes you don't realize how long it could end up being at the end of the product. So it's good to just keep it, you know, within a time frame so that you can keep everyone engaged and keep everyone
Absolutely
watching on top. Okay, so that's what we're working on. And it's funny because I was gonna say, I bet you a lot of couples are really like hopefully reconnecting during all this, because they've had to make a lot of decisions. So there's had to have been a lot of communication happen, I think.
100%.
Between all of the couples with what they want to do moving forward, right? Do they want to go more intimate? Do they want to wait out and have the bigger party? And then the other thing is just, how much have you missed dancing?
Yeah, so
because I miss it.
Me too. I miss dancing. Actually, one of my next points was going to be to do virtual dance classes, because I think those are fun. And a lot of people are always worried about their quirky dance moves that they don't know how to move. So if you're behind a screen, it's actually not that bad, and you're in the comfort of your own home. So you can brush up on your dancing skills and dance a little bit together, and that will be a nice way of kind of like setting the mood. You can also practice a lot of your first dances. You know, if you're not sure what song you want to hear, this is a great time to figure it out, because you know, sometimes people either have the song they've always wanted to hear, or others I'm like, I have no idea what song I want. So this is the perfect time, especially in the winter. It's cozy, it's more romantic, you can put candlelight and you can experience those moods together. Do you want to do something more hip and fun, or do you want something a little bit more slow paced and romantic? A great time. But I'm with you, the dancing. I love the dancing part at a wedding. It's so nice to see people letting loose, having a great time, where now people are worried, they're concerned. Should I shimmy to a song, like, you know, like the head bobbers that are just kind of like should I move?
Yeah.
Even if they're in their own little space, I'm one of those people, like I'll be on the side kind of shimmying to the song, so I can feel what everybody is going through. So I'm really hoping we can get dancing back next year, because we need to dance. We need to get out there. It's like a part of our life, you know, being happy and excited.
Yeah, and there's something about when the sun goes down and the last speech has been said, and you just kind of, you want to start, you know, that's the time you're like,
just want to let loose. Exactly. You just want to let loose. You want to have a good time. It's like one of those things. It's just amazing. Yeah. And
well, we're really hoping that that's a soon to be reality, but it's definitely been missed over 2020. I don't think I've realized how much I miss dancing until it's been taken away. Although I did bust it out here recently at my own house. I did. And I was like, oh, I forgot how good that feels.
It just feels so great, and you feel happy, and you're just like, you know, it's such a good thing to have in our life. I was actually watching Footloose the other day.
Yeah.
Have you ever watched that before? When they banded the dancing and then they brought it back. I was like, this is exactly how we feel right now. So I want to advocate to dance again.
There needs to be a flash mob of the Footloose dance when we can dance again, huh?
Right. I will be definitely a part of it. You can count in.
We could get the industry doing the thing.
That would be amazing. I'm sure everybody would love to be a part of it. We all need to let loose a little bit. Have a COVID after party. Yeah. That's what I'm thinking, like throw something so we can just have a good time.
Yeah. If that happened next week, I wouldn't be sad. So anyway, well, thank you for your time today and filling us in on the new regulations as of October 13th, 2020. And fingers crossed that you can come back to the studio soon and we don't have to do virtual.
I know. Well, now I have to be your first guest to go back into
the studio. Last one to leave, first one back in.
Tradition, the last one, the first one back. Anyways, This was wonderful. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah.
And I'm hoping next time we don't have to talk about COVID because,
I know. Honestly, we took a break for a little bit just because, Well,
we need to. Sometimes it's like information overload and we just all need a break.
Yeah.
And now obviously with the new changes, it's important that we bring it back up because this changes a lot, where people were comfortable hosting 50 to 100 and now we're down to 10. It's definitely something different. And we're hoping that it's only going to last 28 days. You know what I mean? And then we can kind of figure it out from there. So fingers crossed that this helps. That's the reason that it's happening, that they're saying it's going to flatten the curve. So let's see what's happening going forward, effective those 28 days.
Amazing.
November 7th.
Well, fingers are crossed. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much.
All right. We'll see you next time.